That's great. Well, Henry, should I make a start and then we can hopefully stick to time? And then we can invite anyone from the waiting room if they are joining a little bit late.
Yeah, please go ahead, Victoria. Thank you.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this evening for what is Maritime Heritage Trust's first members talk. I hope you can all hear me. If anyone is having any difficulties with either their sound or with the screen, please do just send us a message on the group chat and we'll try to help you as best as we can. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we start. Your mics are muted for the duration of the event, just to avoid any background noise. However, we do really encourage you to introduce yourself on the chat. It'd be great to know who's listening today. And if you could also use the chat to throw any questions or comments that you have for our speaker, please post them on the chat at any time during the talk. We'll be collating these ready for the Q&A a bit later on. This is our new series of member talks. And they are all about sharing a mutual love and interest in our maritime heritage throughout the membership. With 4 talks planned across the year, we'll be hearing from vessel owners, experts and organisations across the sector to share our enthusiasm, to share expertise on a range of topics, including conservation, rebuild projects, skills development, community engagement and maritime histories, covering a real broad range of things that are affecting our sector, as well as just a general love for everything maritime heritage. Next slide, please, Toby. Can I do that? There we go. So tonight we're delighted to welcome our speaker, Dr. Toby Jones from Friends of the Newport Ship, a nautical archaeologist and curator of the Newport Medieval Ship. Toby has been with the project since the very beginning and has had a wealth of experience from previous projects, including the Red River wreck in Oklahoma and the Mika shipwreck in the Gulf of Mexico. He also has participated in shipwreck surveys along the southern coast of Cyprus and in the Algarve in Portugal. So in order to help us keep to time, without further delay, I'm going to pass over to Dr. Toby Jones now, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of his talk. So thank you very much, Toby.
Great, no problem. Okay. What I'm going to attempt to do in the next 45 minutes is cover the last 22 years of history relating to the Newport Ship project. And so what I thought I'd do is start right at the beginning with the discovery back in the summer of 2002. And just to give you a bit of context, I will just wait for these. Just waiting for the slide to come up. Okay, so the ship was discovered exactly 22 years ago, and it was found in the center of Newport in the UK, in South Wales. It was discovered during building works. It was a chance find. They had no idea anything was on this site, and they were constructing a riverfront theater and art center. And they started digging down, actually 4 or 5 meters down. They found loads of different archaeology on the site, and then eventually hit the intact remains of a large clinker-built merchant ship. Now, this ship is, we know so much about it because for the last 22 years, we've been just doing painstaking archaeological research along with the conservation. One of the big components was the dendrochronological dating. And we now know, just in the last couple of months, we just published this, did oxygen isotope dendro on some of the framing timbers in the ship. And we know now the 6 or 7 timbers that were tested, they were all cut down the trees were harvested between September of 1457 and March of 1458. And so also the keel returned an oxygen isotope date of 1457. So we know the ship was built. They felled the big beech tree that was used for the keel in 1457. So it seems like they're building the ship 1457 into 1458 and launching it soon after. We know that it came into Newport late 1460s. Specifically, we know it came in between the spring of 1468 and the winter of 1469, again, based on dendro dates of timbers above and below the ship. So we're looking at about a 10-year life, late 1450s to late 1460s. The timbers are Basque from the area behind San Sebastian and in the Basque Country in northern Spain. But interestingly, well, everything about the ship suggests it's Basque, but every single thing found on board is Portuguese. All the ceramics, the coins, anything you can get a location on, Portuguese. So it looks like while it may be Basque built in the late 1450s, it looks like it was probably built for Portuguese traders and merchants, and that they sailed it more or less exclusively for the next 10 years. And it looks like, because we found parts of 100 casks on board, it looks like it was engaged in the wine trade, taking large casks of red wine from the Iberian Peninsula and France, most likely up to Bristol. And then Bristol's right across from Newport, right across the estuary. And it looks like the ship was engaged in this, north-south run across the Bay of Biscay, trading wine. And it looks like it popped over to Newport for repairs. And we know this because there was a cradle structure found underneath the ship that had been pre-erected to basically hold the ship up. And it looks like there's lots of evidence that the ship was in the middle of being repaired or refitted in 1468-9. And it looks like somehow or another that cradle structure collapsed. And without that support, the ship heeled over onto its starboard side. And we have an enormous tidal range here, something on the order of 12, 13, 14 meters. And so you have this, bowl-shaped object over on its side, and the next incoming tide will just fill it with mud and water. We have evidence that they attempted to pump it out even after it had fallen over and raise it, but they just could not fight this every 12 hours, hundreds of tons of mud and water flooding in. And eventually they gave up trying to refloat it, and they set about salvaging what they could still reach. And so we're missing the upper parts. And on the surviving uppermost bits of the ship, you can see where they hacked away quite crudely with axes and adzes to remove all the timbers they could still reach. And but during that process, they approximately 1,000 timbers, loose timbers, rained down, around the ship and inside of it. So not only do we have the articulated hull that you see in that image there, we also have like 1,000 timbers that were loose that look like they're part of the ship. So those were recovered as well. So in the end, some 2,500 timbers were raised. The excavation was the only way it was possible to remove the ship, to recover it, was to disassemble it. And so the ship was what you see in that image there with the archaeologist that's looking towards the stern. Gives you an idea of the scale. That is probably 5 to 6 meters below the ground level where that guy's standing. And also, interestingly, there's not a single photo of the entire ship at one time in the ground. It was impossible to capture the whole thing at once. And so every time you look at a photo of the ship from the excavation, you're only seeing part of it. In this case, there's a concrete pile right in the main mast tip there. So that's the center line. And you're looking aft. And so the port side is here on the right, starboard on the left, and then the bow is out of view in this bottom edge. So it's a very big ship, approximately 30 meters long on the keel originally. We have about 24 meters of remains surviving, but it looks like it was about 30 meters long and maybe even 35 meters long on deck, or extreme length overall. We have evidence. Well, I'll show you some images to explain the rig and all that. Absolutely incredible preservation. You can see the archaeologists, when they discovered it, they were actually walking back and forth on the ship in their steel toe caps on the timbers. It's incredible. It's as hard as a rock. A couple of reasons for this. The entire structural part of the ship is made of oak, except for the keel, which is beech. And they tarred it heavily, inside, outside, every seam, overlap, joint was filled with tar. We were pulling timbers apart after the ship was raised. Sometimes they raised several timbers still stuck together. When we were pulling these apart, they were still black gooey tar and smelled like a pine forest when we're popping say a patch tingle or a panel or opening to a scarf joint up. And so that tar really helped preserve it. And it was the absolute perfect conditions for organics. It was cold, dark, wet river mud and no oxygen. And above all, it was stable. And so the ship basically just entered kind of suspended animation. It really is, it's strange. It's waterlogged, but it's really not very decayed, if that makes sense. It's wonderful material to work with from an archaeological perspective because of the fantastic surviving surface detail and edges, but it's a nightmare to conserve, and I'll talk about that towards the end. Okay, should have a slide here for, yeah, just gives you an idea of the couple of contemporary images or modern images of what the ship might have looked like as a sailing vessel. Looking at 3 masts, main mast has a big square sail on it, and so I mentioned San Sebastian. I don't know if you can see my mouse. San Sebastian is here in this corner of top of northern Spain, and then all the environmental evidence is from here in specifically the nuts and seeds and the coins. Everything's from, say, Lisbon south towards the Algarve down here. And we believe it's crossing back and forth up towards, well, into Bristol here, and then popping over to Newport for repairs in the late 1460s. Just a quick shot of what Newport would have looked like in the 15th century. We have a big castle, part of it's still there today, the town bridge. And then just down from that, that's where the ship was found, in the side of the riverbank. And it was on this purposely erected cradle there. That is it was a side channel in the river, Pill. And it, because we have such a huge tidal range there, it erodes these sort of canyons in the sides of the riverbank, and it was just a perfect place to park the ship. However, when the ship became deposited there, it completely sealed that Pill and blocked it off. And so, and then actually, I think I mentioned there was a lot of other archaeology found on top of the ship right up to modern times. Interestingly, the ship wasn't the oldest thing in that hole. As when they raised the ship, they took the ship apart, disassembled it, raised the keel, found a bunch of the cradle timbers, raised some of those up, and underneath one of those big struts was a skeleton, and the skeleton was a 25 to 30-year-old male. Looked like the poor guy got crushed when the ship fell over, and it was only about 4 or 5 months later the radiocarbon dates came back, and this guy was Iron Age, about 180 BC, and the had been buried there, but no head, no feet. But some otherwise articulated, intact, this skeleton, and 1,700 years later, the ship falls on top of him, and then rediscovered all of it in 2002. But nothing to do with the ship, but it does show that channel was there at least back into the Iron Age, that Paleo channel. And this bottom image shows the cofferdam. That's why the ship was discovered. This huge site, more or less at random, when they were doing the redevelopment work, it was for the orchestra pit. They needed to dig one hole very deeply in front of where the planned stage was. And so they put this sheet pile cofferdam in completely at random across this big site. And the Newport ship runs corner to corner across that cofferdam. Imagine if they put that cofferdam in 20 meters to the left or right, they would have missed the ship completely. So the ship was, I mentioned the only way to raise it was to take it apart. And so it took about 3 months to uncover the ship, as in the last image you saw. 3 months to uncover it and document it. And then it took 3 months to take it apart. So 6 months start to finish, and those latter 3 months into, say, October, November, December of 2002, very hard, difficult work as they pried the ship apart. And the ship was clinker built, and it was fastened together. The planking runs were fastened together with wrought iron clench nails, but they were largely corroded. They weren't really the issue. The issue was how they attached the planking to the framing. They used 30 millimeter wooden tree nails, split and turned oak tree nails. They were as well preserved as the timbers they were in, and some of these tree nails, well, all of them, they were swollen. They would not come out. And so if you look really closely at the bottom image, there's a couple of doorstop looking bits of wood, light colored wood. those are actually like doorstops and like shallow wooden wedges. And that's how they basically drove hundreds of those in, the archaeologists, to separate the planking from the framing just enough, just 2 or 3 millimeters, in order to get the fish a saw blade in there with their fingers and saw back and forth. And so that's how they had to sever every single one of these tree nails. Well, every plank frame intersection had at least one tree nail, and so there were over 8,000 tree nails. And there were about 20 in the original hull. There would have been about 27,000 of those wrought iron nails. But like I said, they were wrought iron, and they had very much 99 out of 100 had no metallic iron whatsoever. And that bottom image, top image, you see what it's like for the archaeologists on site, very, very muddy. And the bottom, you can see the skeleton that was found. So what next? So this is what, this is 2002. They discover the ship, they raise it. Everything's really out by Christmas, except they're allowed to go back in April of 2003 and dig a little bit in one other area. And they found 125 more timbers, including part of the stem post of the ship. So that was recovered. And all that was moved to a number of sites through the city, and eventually all of it was brought together in a huge warehouse in Newport. A warehouse was 50 meters by 50 meters, and we had 17 of these 5 by 10 meter tanks, and this is a shot of one of those tanks. So when you walked in this warehouse, it was like an airplane size hangar. It was tank after tank after tank of disassembled medieval ship timbers. And so the question then, this is into 2004, the question is, what do we do now? Everything was kept wet. I took that photo between water changes, so normally they were submerged at all times. And so the, walking into this warehouse was quite a sight. You can see it's all clinker. These are all lap strake floor timbers and futtocks as well. And so, and that's 5 meters across and 10 meters along that tank. So let's see if the next one comes up. So this was the warehouse we had for the first 10 years or so. And so first order of business was start cleaning the timbers and clean them so that we get all the concretions, the tar, the animal fiber off, so that we can go on into documentation. And then what happened, and then also, conservation. So we had a team of about 15 core staff and loads of volunteers and students and archaeologists, conservators, and we have a local university, Cardiff, that has an archaeological conservation course as well. So they were, sending lots of students our way. And we started, I did the numbers in 2012, and at that point we'd done 110,000 hours of post-ex cleaning and recording at this stage. First order of business was cleaning, and we used dental tools, water, little hammers and chisels, and the concretions were just a nightmare. But what was underneath them was remarkable. The most impressive surviving surface detail. So that's just, toothbrushes, water, cleaning the concretions off. And I'll show you another image here showing that is the surface of a plank. And you can see how covered it, you can see in the lower edge, those are the wrought iron nail heads, about 45, 50 mil diameter, but they're just rusted, concreted away. There's sand, barnacles, the river clay. If you look on the top edge, you see that's the animal fiber they used. We must have taken a skip or two's worth of animal fiber and tar, scraped it off the planks and the scarf joints. Every overlap, every joint I mentioned was filled with tar, but it was also filled with animal fiber, predominantly wool. But there were like 9 different animals and like 1 pinch of fiber. But that was mixed with the tar to bind it all together and basically create this waterproof sort of gasket between any 2 wooden surfaces. So they must have had a whole big industry collecting. This stuff looks like tannery waste and maybe a byproduct of spinning as well. They must have, along with the tar, the animal fiber must have been a bit of a commodity. So this all had to be carefully cleaned, and we had 2,500 timbers, and some of the timbers were, average plank was 3 or 4 meters long, 2 sides to it, covered like this, and sometimes you could only do like 1 timber a day. but it was so important to clean it because underneath that was the most remarkable preservation of surface detail. Carpenter's marks, inscribed lines, a huge array of tool marks. Very slow. Okay. So if you see here, these are converging lines. You have parallel marks that look like count marks. We're not sure what there's converging lines, there's converging arcs, there's diamonds. Just 1,200 examples we've found so far preserved on the surfaces of the timbers. Even on the outboard face, they survive. And arguably even more remarkable, see the impression of the nail head, these big round head wrought iron nails that they drove through the planks and then put a rove on the inside and clenched over. That's obviously the diameter of the nail. That's the shank of the nail, about 10 mil. But if you look above the shank there, can you see the star? That is a little star shape. We found that, we had to find it a dozen times before we actually believed it. It's actually the blacksmith's maker's mark, preserved. It was on the nail, and that nail got pounded into the timber, and it's like a ghost. It got pressed in there, but that nail dissolved long ago. But everything about that nail, even the maker's mark, is preserved on the surface of the timber. So that's why it was important to do that kind of painstaking cleaning to uncover this. And so that took a good 3 or 4 years, and lots of just dozens of people, cleaning away. The public would donate toothbrushes, and you'd, it was a huge effort, but it was totally worth it in the end. Let's see. So once the timbers were clean, we then documented them, we recorded them, and we were lucky. We used 3-dimensional contact digitizers and also laser scanning. This is all back in the 2000s. And we used, we made 3-dimensional models. We used Rhinoceros software, Rhino 3D. We made 3D models. We then sent those 3D models to Cardiff University. They had a magic thing called a 3D printer, totally experimental. So they 3D printed every single part of the ship for us at 1:10 scale. We put it together, made a model. And then we used lots of digital modeling, mostly Rhino though as a software. And we were able to reconstruct, the archaeological material that was recovered. We were able to ghost in the missing areas, based on, kind of ghost evidence. And then we had things in red that we didn't have any sort of evidence for, but it made sense. Like, the ship needs a rudder. So we built up these fairly complex 3D models, and then we were able to load them with kind of notional cargoes. We reconstructed the casks that were found on board and populated the ship with casks, and then you're able to run the ship through the naval architecture software and gives you all the parameters, the sailing characteristics, seakeeping, and how safe it is or not. And in this case, it really is a phenomenally, I guess design is the wrong word. The hull is beautiful. The hull is amazing. The underwater form really can't be improved on. And they knew exactly what they were doing. And, this is there's almost no difference in the underwater hull form between this and, say, what came 100 years later at Red Bay. And that's Carvel, completely different way of building it, but the underwater form is they're more or less identical. If, say, you look at the midship section, they are identical. So it's they made an excellent ship, the highest quality construction. We haven't found any mistakes. The material is of the highest quality, huge amount of, straight grained oak. And they were chamfering and beveling things like the limber hole down in the, that sat on top of the keel on the bottom of the floor timbers. The fit and finish is remarkable. And so a lot of pride, I think, and care went into building this. And so it is just, every time you look at any of these timbers, it's just an amazing insight into the medieval craftsmanship and shipbuilding. This is a cutaway drawing of the ship. We're still working on it, but it just shows you what life might have been like on board, and you're looking at least 40 crew to sail a ship like this, perhaps even 60. It's 40 people minimum just to lift the main yard using the capstan or windlass. And I think I have a couple slides on this about some of the environmental remains, about the foodstuffs we found on board, and also all the different critters, and including flies, fleas, lice, you name it. There was a lot happening on this ship. And so we have been so fortunate from the start to be able to do such detailed analysis of basically every artifact class and all the environmental samples that were recovered. And so the environmental samples, they took when they discovered the ship, and it was a rescue excavation, very, very a huge amount of pressure to get it done as quickly as possible. Well, they grabbed all the mud between the interframe spaces down in the bilges and put each section into like a builder's rubble sack, tied it up, labeled it up, and took it away. And it took us like almost 10 years to get around to actually even opening those bags. And we did. They were still wet, and so we did the sieving and flots and residues, and it was absolutely doubled our knowledge about what life was like on board, just what was in those 100 or so environmental samples. So really phenomenal insight into what the ship was doing and what life was like on board. Just a few objects. We have, like I said, about 1,000, and this is just one of the really special ones. What you're seeing in the top there is the forwardmost part of the keel. The keel was a single piece of beech, and the stem post was made of oak, and it's scarfed over that. It's like a vertical scarf, and the stem post then rose up. And right where the keel stem scarf was, right on the upper surface of the keel, when the day they started building the ship, they chiseled this little tiny square hole in the top, and they put a silver French coin in with a cross on it facing up in that hole, and as a good luck charm. And that was, we walked by this timber for a couple of years, and we never, we had thousands of timbers to clean. We just, worked through them. And then after walking by this timber for several years, it was time to clean it, pulled it out, and the conservator was cleaning it away, and came running upstairs, said, I think I found a coin. This little hole just kind of opened up, and this shiny silver coin was there. So we talked to our Basque colleagues, and they say they still do this today. They still put coins there in that part of the ship on their small traditional boats, and they have a priest there blessing it, because that's the first thing that hits the rocks, that bow of the ship. So they try to give it divine protection. So brilliant bit of brilliant find there. We found a handful of Portuguese coins as well, including this kind of gold or brass colored one up here. That's actually a jeton. It's a merchant's counter, and it's from Nuremberg in Germany. But that's about the only artifact on board that isn't demonstrably Iberian. Maybe the French coin as well. The French coin's interesting because it's from Lyon, or from Crémier, which is south of Lyon, kind of in eastern France. But really, there's nothing on board the ship, really nothing apart from some of the timbers that are British. There's no artifacts that are really conclusively British. There's nothing North European. There's nothing Mediterranean. It's all Iberian, or really specifically Atlantic Iberian on board. All the ceramics, every single piece, it's all Portuguese micaceous redware, and we have we're still doing work on that, but it's all bits and pieces of a lot of different objects, and a lot of it's soot stained, so it all looks like it's part of the crew's what the crew is using, not some sort of cargo. The preservation was remarkable for organics, and so that covers the leather as well. We have 7 or 8 big boxes of conserved leather objects and lots of different shoes, and that's one of those pointy-toed shoes that has the curl in the toe. Very high status shoe that was found down in the bilges, and just lots of other bits and pieces of leather. The ship had amazing pump-related artifacts. I think we found over 40 different things that were related to the pumps, from the wood, leather, and metal pump spears to the wood and leather and metal foot valves and the board out. hollowed out or bored out tree trunk that served as the pump tube. And what's really cool about it is we found at least 4 different pumping stations on board the ship at various points in its life, but every single pump part is exactly the same diameter. It's all interchangeable, or it's consistent, even though it's handmade. It's being made to an exact pattern. So just a few more of the artifacts. We found wooden combs. One of the combs was wood like this, single-sided one, but it was double-sided, coarse for straightening and fine for getting the lice out. We have carved, turned wooden gaming piece, some fragments of fabric or clothing surviving. We have the stone shot surviving, but not the guns. And the stone shot is, it's interesting because it indicates that the ship was armed, and we have other defensive artifacts as well. But the stone shot, this is very early for guns on ships. This is the 1450s, 60s. I don't have time to talk about it, but we do have some tantalizing possible links to the Wars of the Roses. In our case, we have a letter from the Earl of Warwick, who was Warwick the Kingmaker. In 1469, he's writing a couple of paragraphs saying, "Fix my ship in Newport." And that's exactly what's happening to this ship in Newport in 1469. However, it's circumstantial. We don't have a name for the ship yet, and that letter doesn't name a ship, but I'm sure the answer is out there in the foreign archives. And we're just trying to sort the archaeology out and give all the information to the historians, but they have lots of good candidates looking at enrollment records and tax records for the 1450s and 60s. And right now the Basques are looking for construction contracts because we've narrowed down the construction date so closely to, let's say, 1457-8. This is an absolute mystery, this artifact. This is we can see the photograph. There were fragments of an iron helmet found down in the bilges, smashed up. And it's decorated with this brass lateen strip around the rim of the helmet. And it's an entire biblical verse in Latin in this Gothic script, stamped all the way around. And so very high status. Royal Armory says it's like prince level or king level armor even. They're kind of at a loss. Why is it smashed up in the bottom of the ship? Well, what's a even bigger mystery is what it actually is. It's Italian, and it's from the 1300s. So it's it's already an antique. So along with that pointy-toed shoe, the Poulain, that's a very high status shoe. There's some things on board that are unusual we have lots. We have lots of little mysteries like that. But I'm just giving you a little, very rushed tour of just a few of the artifacts. Rigging, we have arguably the nicest collection of medieval or late medieval rigging, and it's all been extensively studied. Everything's really been exhaustively studied, and we have a great online archive that all the specialist reports are all there. They're all free, and you just Google ADS Newport ship, and everything we've ever done, we've put in the archive. It's like 20,000 files, and every photograph, drawing, specialist report, it's all there. It's all free. So we've tried to be open access about all of this. So if rigging's your thing, you can get the full report for free online. Oh yeah, I mentioned the pump. These are just brilliant pump-related artifacts that were recovered. The insects I mentioned, absolute miserable, I think, experience deep down in the ship. Just the sheer number, like thousands of fleas and flies and lice preserved down in the mud, just gives you an idea of who you were sharing the ship with. We have like rabbit-sized rats on board the ship as well. Rats that are so old that the teeth in the mandible are worn down to the jawbone, and they are rabbit size. absolute wealth of animal bone and fish bone was found in the bilges, and this during the environmental sampling and then the environmental processing. All of this was analyzed. Monster medieval chickens, and some of the cod were like a meter long. So I think there were 17 different kinds of fish and shellfish on board, and just about every animal, like farmyard type animal you could name, was represented. And some of them have butchery marks on them. Fantastic array of food remains, from nuts and seeds to various plant remains. And, we have mustard, flax, pomegranates, figs, almonds. I think we have 26 pages of plant remains that were really give you an insight about what it could be carrying and also what the crew were eating. So just one slide here on conservation. We progressed through cleaning, recording, and then analysis of, photography, dendrochronology, all that. And then we started active conservation. So we started soaking the timbers in diammonium citrate, and that was to remove any soluble iron salts, because we tried to mechanically remove all the visible iron, but we also knew there was soluble iron salts, corrosion products in the timbers. Pretty amazing. We did that ammonium citrate treatment again and again and again, and you throw it in there and the timbers, you come back the next day, the solution would look like iron brew, and we were pulling out many kilos of iron salts into solution, and then we would flush that and then do it again. So we removed and then we would track it each time, and we're pulling less and less out, and eventually pulling really nothing out. So we mechanically removed all the iron we could, then we chemically removed all the iron that was soluble. Then we started polyethylene glycol treatment, and to fairly low percentages. And then once that impregnation was at a satisfactory level, we then did vacuum freeze drying. And then at that point, we had, so we started, say, PEG treatment in 2009. We finished in January of 2022, and it was really, it took a lot longer than planned, the freeze drying, and it was because the timbers, if you remember what I said early on, the timbers were so well preserved that the peg was it was very difficult to get the peg to soak in any great distance, and it was very difficult to get the water out. And so instead of taking a couple of months for a load of timbers to dry, it was taking 4 or 5, even 5.5 months for a single load. Well, if you can only fit 100 timbers in a load and you have 2,500 timbers, you can very quickly see it's not going to take years, it's going to take decades. And so it took us all the way through exactly a year ago to finish the drying. So that was the mixing the chemicals, tank after tank after tank, and then in our huge warehouse. And then this is the conservation, lifting and shifting and using the crane, the gantry, the Arctic lorry after Arctic lorry after Arctic lorry. It was such a logistical thing to move all these timbers around. Some went to York, some went to Mary Rose here in the UK, and they all had to come back again. And so it was a huge effort to get all the to complete the conservation. But it's all done now. This is the one load going into the freeze dryer, and then once they were out of the freeze dryer, we built insulated controlled chambers to store them in. Initially we used shipping containers, but quickly realized they were going to be, we needed a lot of shipping containers. So we ended up building these huge rooms, these big chambers that are just 100 mil Kingspan all around, and we can drive the forklift in and put the timbers up on, put them on pallets and put them up on shelves. And so we have 2 of these big stores we built in our big ship center, and they're absolutely full. 2,500 timbers are now dry and in safe storage. And so what we're doing now, this is the last of the timbers coming out at the Mary Rose last year. And so what we're focusing on now is reassembly and display plans. And so we're starting to do trial reassemblies where we take some of the dried planks and put them back together, like 10 adjacent planks. Takes up say 4 by 3x4 square meters, so size of your sitting room or something, and that's 10 planks out of 1,000, and it takes up that much space. So you can't do any sort of large scale reassembly in our current facility. So we're just doing trial reassemblies. We're also working with Swansea Uni to develop cradle structure. We're basically, we know that all archaeological ships on display anywhere in the world, almost without exception, they are all suffering some sort of collapse or distortion, and they're inadequately supported or they're point loading. There's also a process called creep, which is where the peg impregnated wood is the wax is necessary to stabilize the timber, but it's doing a couple other things that are unintended. One of them is it's softening. It's like almost like a hair conditioner. It's softening the wood cell, the cell walls a little bit, but it's also acting as a lubricant between wood cells. And so when you have a static or a load on, say, a timber, a constant load, it's actually these wood cells are sliding past each other, maybe just microns, but over thousands of wood cells that actually accumulates. And so we're having this. We know Mary Rose has problems, Vasa has problems, Basin Bremen Cog has problems. Everything, even small boats on display have problems, and it's a problem with this material. This conserved wood is not wood anymore. It's not pegged wax. It's a new material. It has new and interesting and unique properties, and we're just in the stages of trying to understand those properties. And what we do know is that in Newport we have a very good situation here in that Mary Rose and Vasa, they never took them apart. What we have here is an opportunity. Newport Ship is apart right now. We have to put it together. That's a challenge they didn't have, but it gives us an opportunity, and that's we can actually build a cradle first. And we are proposing to build a lattice work cradle out of fiber reinforced polymer and build that cradle first in the museum, and then build the ship around it. So we get like think of like a fiberglass shell, and you basically fasten all the planks on the outside of this shell, and you effectively hide the cradle from the outside. And then on the inside, you put all your framing timbers, stringers, ceiling planks, and you hide the cradle from the inside. So you effectively have no cradle. It's invisible. And it's a matter of just making this cradle out of the right material and the right stiffness. And so that's what we're working on right now with Swansea. And it's pretty exciting because we keep, I think we spent at least 5 years on this, and every milestone we've hit says, yes, this is good, proceed with this plan, because we really, you can't ask these timbers to do anything. They may look strong. Ours are exceptionally strong, but you really shouldn't. Looks can be deceiving. You should not ask them to take even necessarily their own weight. It's that's, I think, the mistake in the past, is that these big ships on display, or just any of the archaeological ships, the mistake has been made of asking them to take some of the load. They shouldn't take any of the load. It's I think it may last for 50 years, but you'll have problems at some point. I mentioned the online archive. It's on the Archaeology Data Service. There's also several IGNA articles that have been written, and there's a couple of books, and there's guidebooks, and so there's lots of information out there. And if you look on the Newport Ship website, there's big bibliographies of everything that's been published. And if you need any articles, just email me and I can send them to you as well. Right, so that is the Newport Ship in a nutshell, right on time. If you want to see a really cool animation, you can just type in Vimeo, Vimeo there, Vimeo Newport Ship, and there'll be a great 8 or 9 minute animation. I don't have time to show it now, but it shows what life's like on board and the ship sailing. It's a really pin sharp animation. It's all based on our archaeological evidence kind of brought to life. And we're doing another animation right now, which is going to be same clarity, same resolution, and it's going to go from trees in the forest to the timber transport, to the construction of the ship, to the launching of the ship. And so that'll be the next animation that we hope to get out this summer. So that's our long-term plan, is continue researching, reassembling display. And then right now, so I'm curator for the city museum. My job is to figure out how to rebuild the ship and how to support it, and the city's job is where. And so right now the city's getting behind a plan to they're doing feasibility studies to do a whole new city museum and art gallery for Newport. And so you can imagine in the future we'd have like a big new building with a dinosaur-sized hall in the middle of it that we can build the ship in. You can't build this thing and move it, so we need a new museum first, and then we take all of our material there in the cradle and build that in situ. But luckily, the public can watch all that, so and participate. So that's the plan. I think it's going to realistically take another 10 years, but we've been doing it 22 years now. So what's another 10? Right. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Oh, thank you so much, Toby. That was such an interesting talk. It's absolutely incredible what a project this is, and as you say, how long a project you've been working on. It's amazing. I say we've got a short Q&A now, so please, if anyone does have any questions or comments that they'd like to put to Toby, please do put them in the chat box, and we'll be going through those in just a moment. I thought maybe I could start off the Q&A actually, Toby, with a question about the partnerships that you've built around this project. As you say, you've been going for 22 years. It's got another sort of 10 ahead of it. And listening to you can really see the scale of the project and some of the problems that you faced. And I wondered if you could speak just briefly to the importance of the partnerships that you've developed and how you've been able to go out and develop those, because I know a lot of our member vessel projects, that's often a first stumbling block, is how do you can take it so far, but then how do you go to the right people who can open the next door for you? I wondered if you could speak a little bit more about that.
Okay, in terms of partnerships, really from day one, we've had academic partnerships with University of Wales and Swansea and Cardiff, and so all for different aspects. So Swansea's engineering, Cardiff's conservation, University of Wales, archaeology, and we have these great. We find them very receptive, and they like it because it's real world stuff for them to work on. So you go to them and say, oh, look, I have corrosion problem. And they're like, oh, this is great. This is real, like a real problem. And the university benefits, we benefit. We have, good links with the national museums so they can do analysis for us. And we also, so we have the academic links, and we also benefit so much from basically all the shipwreck projects in Europe. We have like open doors. We communicate all the time, and because there aren't that many of us, who have big wooden archaeological ships on display or getting there, that we all share our, the good things and the bad things. So they have these kind of, I'd say it's pretty informal, but it's really amazing the support and the links we have with someone, you say like Mary Rose or the Vasa, and it's let's see, these networks, sometimes they are more formal. They'll have, we'll get like European Union funding to develop a research network, something like that. So I guess my experience is more on the academic side for partnerships. We have our Friends of the Ship charity, and so that they've been super helpful. The project has so many facets. So the Friends of the Ship, they're fanatical from day one, and they do so much to raise awareness and give talks, and then they run the open days. So we have this, they run every Friday, Saturday. The volunteers are key. We couldn't run it. I'm the only one who works there, and so they're absolutely key to the public outreach and engagement side of things. So I don't like, if you have a problem like with your vessel and you want to, my first, obviously you just talk to your sister projects, but my first thing would be to, go to a university and say, I've got this problem. And, they love real world applications. And so we've really been fortunate there.
That's great. That's really good advice that you say, to just step outside the world of ships sometimes can often hold the answer. and partner with some other experts. Well, we've got a few questions from our audience. Ben Gilbert has asked, what kind of conservation is required for the animal hair caulking impregnated with tar? Is the tar itself a preservative for the fibers?
Yeah, actually, there was no conservation at all. We just air dried it. It was the tar was just like the day it was made, and it was just coated everything. So I don't even think we had to. Very interesting on Newport. Again, just kind of a mystery, but we had we had no salinity present anywhere, and so we didn't have that problem with chlorides that you normally have. They I suppose it was in the silts and all that, but it hadn't soaked into the timbers, and I think that's because the timbers were so heavily tarred. So we were able to avoid that whole problem, which most wooden ship, archaeological conservation projects have, which is trying to get the salt out. And so that same with the caulking, though. I think that tar just, I remember we were pulling planks apart. You could pour water on, and it would just beat up, and you could just brush it off, and it was just that tar. That tar is that tar needs a lot of, or deserves a lot of credit. So I wonder, it's wood tar, and I think we can see that they not only did they tar the ship as they built it, absolutely everywhere, all the time, probably repeatedly, they tarred the ship during its use life as well. And so that there was this, you could see the degraded tar products everywhere. Anywhere it was sealed, it was black and gooey, but everywhere else, like exposed, it was degraded to this kind of tan, yellowy, chalky substance. But it tested back to being, just what do we call that? The broken down product, the tar, that degraded tar. So yeah, no conservation.
Excellent. And
It
we've
still
got
smells. You can still take pinches of it and smell it. It just smells like tar. Just smells like a chandler's loft, or a sail loft.
take you right back there. Incredible. And we've got a follow-up from Ben as well, actually asking what materials will be used for fasteners in the reconstruction.
We would use fiber reinforced polymer fasteners. I should have brought one. We're using it's like glass fiber and nylon or polyamide. It's pretty clever stuff. It's like carbon fiber. They're basically fiber reinforced polymer. It's any manner of fibers and any manner of polymers. There's endless choices, and it's about finding the right mix, and even for different mixes for different applications. And I found that it's actually about the same price as stainless. And so if I needed 6, 7, 8 tons of stainless, I don't want 8 tons to add 8 tons of weight to the upper parts of the ship. Whereas this stuff, you'd add like maybe 300 kilos or something for the equivalent. It's so light and strong. It's amazing. And it's inert. And so FRPs have amazing properties. FRPs are pretty lousy. They're getting better, but their shortcoming is they don't like dynamic loads, like bridges that change. So they wouldn't necessarily have good applications on maybe a working ship. But if it's a static display, that's a dream material. Load it once and that's it. So it's just contact me if you want to know more about FRPs. They're starting to be used a lot more in construction, but they have a lot of advantages, and they solve a lot of problems that we have had with previous materials used in conservation.
Excellent. We'll make sure to certainly send your contact details around if that's okay, in a follow-up email to the attendees, so they can go further with their questions a little bit more. We've got two that are of a similar tones from Henry and Hannah Herford, who are both asking with regards to how the public engagement is going, what the response has been from the local community, and what the engagement plan is going forward.
From the which community?
From your local community.
Oh, okay. We have, I think we've kept track. I'd have to look back and add it up, but we've given hundreds, if not 1,000 or more talks to everything from Rotaries to WIs to archaeological societies, history societies. We get calls every week. We take bookings like a year in advance. It's just, we do at least 50 or 100 of these talks a year. And we are open to the public every Friday and Saturday during, basically Easter to Halloween. And we get thousands of people who come to the ship center, just in singles, twos, threes, families. But we also have probably another similar amount come as pre-booked group tours. So we have kind of those three things: the two types of visits to the ship center, casual or group tours, and then we also have the absolutely huge number of, more than we can give. We're constantly trying to recruit volunteers, but it's very difficult to get the volunteers who want to speak, who want to go out and publicly talk. So we could basically, we don't even really advertise that we do these talks, and we just, one talk breeds two more. That's what happens. There's, it's a great way of, I think of it as, you're just making like 20 or 50 friends at a time. You just keep spreading the word and telling them about your project, and you've just made 50, you got 50 new fans, and I just think that's what, because we don't, we're a small local authority. We don't have budgets for advertising, all that. It's just down to us to try to raise awareness and keep it going. So that's how we do the public engagement. And we had them for our 20th anniversary. We thought, let's just have one big summer open day like we used to way back in the start. We had 3 or 4 summer open days instead of being open all the time. And this last late July, we had our summer open day. We had 2,000 people in one day in 6 hours at the ship center. It was double what we thought, or it was double what we were prepared for, would be more accurate. And so it shows the public are just fascinated. People love ships. I don't have to tell you, any of you, this, but we have such an asset here in Newport. It just needs to be put on display. We get thousands and thousands of people a year, and it's just timbers in a warehouse. So you imagine, we've done all the hard work. We just need to get it on display. So yeah, I don't know if I have any secrets about public engagement. I do know we are, we're not really, we just don't have the capacity to deal with schools, but we have interest from schools. They want to visit and they want to, but we just don't have the capacity to really do lots of school tours. But the interest is there from the school side. And one thing I would try, if you have any sort of connections into the education system, is that one time, and we're actually, I think we're on the list right now to go back on the curriculum, but we were on the curriculum like 15 years ago for 1 year, and it was thousands and thousands and thousands of kids came that year. And so it was Heritage Lottery funded and all that. So it's just things like that. If you can get somebody else to, do the advertising or do that, it's remarkable when, and the media as well. I probably don't have time for all this, but we have good links with the BBC. So we tell them things like, we're getting our last load of timbers, and they were there filming, and it went on the World Service. It went on, like 8 million people read the article on the BBC site. Just so it doesn't hurt people. Our projects, these maritime heritage things, they really fascinate the public. So it does not hurt to make a little press release and go out and in advance and say, we're having, we have a bit of our big event or a small event. Something's happening, something new. The news, they were explaining to me, the news is so grim nowadays. They love good news stories. And so you're pushing on an open door. Get in there and do that, and then you'll get a whole bump in your level of public awareness about your project. Don't be shy.
That's some great advice there. Thank you very much. And as you say, I think there's something to be said about just being able to have access to the experts who can open a real treasure chest of wonder to you. And just having that access can really inspire the local community around you. I'm really conscious of time, but we do have one more question from Kieran, who's going through a similar project. I wonder, Kieran, though, if it's possible, if I could put that question to Toby on email, if that's okay, and you can maybe have a follow-up conversation about any hints on the reconstruction stage, if that sounds all right to you, Toby, as well.
Yes.
But we are going to have to start closing down the event because it's nearly 8:30. But thank you very much, Toby, for your time tonight of showing us more about your project. It's incredibly interesting. And thank you to everybody for attending tonight. As I say, we will be we've recorded this and we will be uploading the footage of this talk to our YouTube channel, which is going to be open to members only. These are members only events. We will be having 3 more this year. So if you know anyone who would be interested in those, and we'll release more details of our next spring event in the short the sort of the next few weeks. So please do keep an eye out. If you know anyone of interest, let them know. Point them to where they can sign up to Maritime Heritage, and there's a few details on your screen there, hopefully, to our YouTube channel and also to our website. But for now, thank you very much, Toby, again, for such a wonderful talk, and we look forward to hopefully following a little bit more with you on email. Thank you very much, everyone.